Hey everyone, this video is going to go through how to complete the step 3 outlining your arguments document. Now, as you work on this document, it would be very helpful for you to have the step 1 and step 2 documents available so you can easily reference those. Basically, this step 3 document is where you are going to be putting everything together. All right, first things first, our thesis statement. All you are doing for your thesis statement is you are stating your stance on the issue at hand. So if you are talking about zoos, you are going to state your particular stance on whether or not there should be zoos and aquariums. And again, you can state it as it is worded in the viewpoint, and then you're going to list your main arguments. So I'm going to use the example that I've been giving for the other videos where I'm talking about prison reform. So in this example, I say, there needs to be prison reform in the United States because it will make prisons safer, reduce recidivism rates, and save taxpayers money. So notice here that there needs to be prison reform in the United States just states my stance, and then I list the 3 main arguments. I'm straightforward, I'm to the point, it's one sentence. All right, so that's that for your thesis statement. Now, what you're going to do for this rest of the document is you're going to develop those 3 main points that you listed in your thesis statement. So the first point I mentioned here was that it will make prisons safer. So my first argument here should be a complete sentence that states that point or that argument. So I say here, one of the main reasons prisons need to be reformed is because it will make prisons safer for both inmates and guards. If I scroll up, the second point that I make here is that prison reform will reduce recidivism rates. So if I scroll down to argument 2, another reason prisons need to be reformed is because it will help reduce recidivism rates. Straightforward, to the point. All right, and then the last main argument I'm making in the thesis is that it will save taxpayers money. And sure enough, when I scroll down to argument 3, it says some people may not feel that reducing recidivism and violence in prisons is something they should concern themselves with. However, most people are very concerned with how their tax dollars are spent. Reforming prisons could ultimately save taxpayers money. Now, my job here then is going to be to look over my step 1 and step 2 documents and pull some of the research that I have on those documents. So your step 1 document really just got you to come up with what you thought the main arguments for each viewpoint were, and then you were finding some research to go along with those arguments. In step 2, you actually started reading more articles, and you would copy and paste facts that pertained to your particular viewpoint. And so now on this document, you're going to go back to your step 2 document, and you're going to find quotes that go along with each of your argument points. Now, you need at least 2 to 3 pieces of evidence for each argument point. If you can't find that research, you might need to switch your argument. So it might not be a strong argument if you can't find any evidence to back it up. So let's just look at an example here. So with argument 1, I said one of the main reasons prisons need to be reformed is because it will make prisons safer for both inmates and guards. And then here is a quote that I found that I felt enhanced this argument or developed this argument. Again, we've talked about this in class. You want to make sure you're trying to find resources, studies, data, specific facts, not necessarily just expert opinions when you're looking for your research. So here we go with one of the quotes. Long-term solitary was supposed to be rehabilitative, but it did not have that effect. Studies have found that inmates who have spent time in solitary confinement are more likely to reoffend than those who have not. Data shows that prisoners in solitary account for about half of all prison suicides. Self-harm is also more common in solitary units than in less restrictive ones. One social psychologist even found that the degree of loneliness experienced by people in solitary is matched only by that of terminal cancer patients. And that was taken from an article that started the first 3 words in the article or title were putting an end. Quick point about citations. If you know the author of the article, you're going to put the author's last name, just as we did when we were writing our To Kill a Mockingbird essays. If you don't know the author of the article, you're going to put the article in parentheses at the end of your citation. All right. Now, what you want to think about is how you would use this point when you're having your discussion. How would I use this statistic or this fact to support my argument point here? Well, what I could talk about is how, like one of the prison reforms I might be suggesting is that solitary confinement is something that should be abandoned in prisons unless it's under like extreme conditions. So, for example, prisoners should not necessarily be there as a punishment. It should more so be used for either the prisoner's safety or the safety of others in the unit. So this definitely proves the psychological damage and harm that solitary confinement can do to inmates, which is one of the main things that I'm arguing in this point here. Another piece of information that I referenced here, and this was taken from an amendment from the Constitution. So instead of putting the citation at the end, I just said, according to the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So here's where I may hone in on the cruel and unusual punishments. I could also, depending on what other research I find, I can also use that and find details and studies that talk about prison conditions and talk about how some of the actions that are taken by guards and taken by prisons need to be modified because maybe some of those actions and policies would fall under cruel and unusual punishments. Okay, so again, as you are putting facts and statistics and information down and copying them from some of your research sources, you want to make sure you're thinking about how you're going to use those cited pieces of information to prove your point. All right, here is just another example. So again, for argument 2, I give the argument on the left. Another reason prisons need to be reformed is because it will help reduce recidivism rates, which means it helps reduce people returning to prison after they've already been there. And then I provide a quote here and give the source in which I found the quote. Again, you need 2 or 3 pieces of evidence for each of your arguments. All right. That is how you do the step 3 document. If you have any questions, please reach out to your teacher.